The lonely rancher had spent 3 winters praying for one miracle, a wife to fill the silence in his home. But when a desperate widow arrived at his snow-covered ranch with 2 frightened little daughters, he realized God had answered his prayer in the most unexpected way. She claimed she wanted nothing except honest work and a safe place to survive the winter. Yet every night she cried in secret, hiding a truth so dangerous that if anyone in town discovered it, everything the rancher had begun to love could be ripped away forever. What was the secret she risked her life to protect? And would the rancher still choose her once he learned the truth? Stay with me until the very end, because this unforgettable story proves that sometimes the greatest blessings arrive wrapped inside the deepest pain. Before we begin, if you enjoy heartwarming Wild West stories about faith, family, and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more unforgettable frontier stories every week. Winter had settled over the Wyoming frontier with a cold so fierce it seemed to freeze hope itself. Thick snow covered every fence post, every rooftop, and every lonely trail stretching across the valley. On a quiet ranch outside the nearest town lived Caleb Dawson, a widowed rancher whose broad shoulders carried more than years of hard work. They carried grief. 3 years earlier, sickness had stolen his beloved wife before they could have children. Since then, the little log cabin that once echoed with laughter had become painfully silent. Caleb worked from sunrise until long after sunset, hoping exhaustion would drown the loneliness waiting inside his home every evening. Friends urged him to remarry, but no woman wished to spend her life on an isolated ranch with a quiet man whose heart still belonged to the past. Instead of complaining, Caleb prayed every night beside his bed. He never asked for riches or a larger herd. He prayed only for someone to share life with, someone who would make the cabin feel like home again. One snowy afternoon, while repairing a broken fence, Caleb noticed movement on the distant trail. At first he thought it was a wandering traveler, but as the figure came closer, he saw a woman struggling through the deep snow while holding the hands of 2 small girls. Their clothes were worn thin, their boots barely held together, and their faces were pale from hunger and cold. The younger girl stumbled repeatedly until her mother lifted her into her arms, despite her own exhaustion. Caleb dropped his tools and hurried toward them. The woman looked frightened as he approached, almost expecting to be turned away. Her light brown hair was tangled from days of travel, and her tired blue eyes revealed countless sleepless nights. "Please," she whispered with trembling lips, "we're not begging. I'll work for food. I can cook, clean, wash clothes, anything. My daughters only need warmth." Without asking another question, Caleb removed his heavy coat and wrapped it around the youngest child before leading them toward the cabin. Inside, he lit the fireplace until flames danced across the room. Soon warm stew simmered over the stove, while the girls quietly devoured fresh bread as though they had not eaten properly in days. The older daughter, Lily, thanked him with remarkable politeness despite her exhaustion. The younger Emma never let go of her mother's hand. The woman introduced herself as Sarah Bennett. She explained only that her husband had died months earlier, leaving debts she could never repay. Rather than remain where every day reminded her daughters of loss, she had traveled west searching for honest work. Caleb noticed she carefully avoided speaking about where she came from. Whenever he gently asked, fear flashed across her face before she changed the subject. That evening, after the girls fell asleep beside the warm fireplace, Caleb quietly spread extra blankets across their beds. He looked at the peaceful faces of the children and felt something unfamiliar stirring inside him. The cabin no longer seemed empty. For the first time in years, silence had been replaced by breathing, by tiny footsteps, by hope. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, 4 lonely hearts unknowingly stood at the beginning of a story that would change every one of their lives forever. Over the following weeks, Sarah and her daughters slowly became part of ranch life. The little cabin that had once echoed with loneliness was now filled with laughter, warm meals, and the sound of small feet racing across the wooden floor. Sarah worked tirelessly from dawn until dusk, cooking hearty suppers, mending worn clothes, and keeping the home spotless. Lily eagerly helped feed the chickens while little Emma followed Caleb everywhere, asking endless questions about horses, cattle, and the snowy mountains surrounding the ranch. Before long, the lonely rancher found himself smiling more than he had in years. As Christmas drew near, Caleb realized he no longer looked forward only to finishing his work. He looked forward to coming home, watching Sarah gently braid her daughter's hair beside the fireplace made him imagine the family he had once believed he would never have. One quiet evening, after the girls had fallen asleep, he finally gathered the courage to speak. "Sarah," he said softly, "I know we haven't known each other long, but this house feels alive because of you. I don't want you to leave when winter ends. Would you consider becoming my wife?" Her tears instantly filled Sarah's eyes. She wanted to say yes. Her heart had already begun to trust the kind rancher who had saved her family without asking for anything in return. But instead of answering, she lowered her head and whispered, "There's something you don't know about me." With trembling hands, she pulled a faded envelope from her apron. Inside were old legal papers and a photograph. "My husband didn't die from illness," she confessed. "He was falsely accused of stealing from a wealthy businessman. Before he could prove his innocence, he was murdered. The same men have been searching for these papers because they expose the real thief. If they discover where I've been hiding, they'll come for me and my daughters." Caleb looked into Sarah's frightened eyes, then quietly folded the papers and placed them back into her hands. "You should have told me sooner," he said gently. "Not because I'd send you away, but because no one threatens my family." For the first time since fleeing her past, Sarah felt truly safe, but neither of them noticed a rider watching the ranch from the distant tree line before disappearing into the falling snow. The secret Sarah had carried across the frontier had finally caught up with her. The greatest test of their love was only beginning. The very next morning, 3 armed riders stormed onto Caleb's ranch demanding Sarah and the papers she carried. Instead of stepping aside, Caleb stood in front of Sarah and her daughters with quiet determination. "If you want this family," he said firmly, "you'll have to go through me first." The commotion drew neighboring ranchers, men whose respect Caleb had earned through years of honesty and hard work. Outnumbered and realizing the town now stood beside the widowed rancher, the outlaws fled before the sheriff arrived. Days later, Sarah's documents proved her late husband's innocence and exposed the wealthy businessman who had orchestrated the crime. Justice, though delayed, finally prevailed. With the past behind them, Caleb knelt before Sarah beneath the snow-covered cottonwood tree where they had first spoken from the heart. "You came here carrying a secret," he said with a warm smile, "but all I ever saw was a brave woman protecting her daughters. If you'll still have me, I'd be honored to spend the rest of my life loving all 3 of you." Through joyful tears, Sarah whispered, "Yes." Lily and Emma threw their arms around Caleb, calling him Pa, for the very first time. In that moment, the lonely ranch that had once echoed with silence became a home overflowing with love, laughter, and hope. Caleb had prayed for a wife, but God gave him something even greater, a family. And Sarah discovered that the greatest love is not built on a perfect past, but on someone who chooses to stand beside you despite it. If this heartwarming Wild West story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable stories of love, faith, and second chances. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next adventure.